Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Abdullah Boguda from lead organizer of Melbourne Silicon Beach. Before I start, I need to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we stand and acknowledge their elders, past, present, and future. Also, I'd like to thank CoWork Me for giving us this space absolutely free of charge. We had open co-working day today. Some of you are from that event. You could talk to other founders and talk to investors and all that kind of thing. We are experimenting with a few different models. Many of you are new to Silicon Beach, so I'll give a short introduction about Silicon Beach. Melbourne Silicon Beach is a tech startup community. Started about 10 years ago, I think, in Sydney, and then Melbourne opened up as a meetup group, just networking at a pub. But from there, we have pivoted on to empowering founders. So we have educational events like this, and co-working days, and pitch nights, and all that sort of things. And now that you're on the meetup, you can see all the upcoming events. We are starting a new series, breakfast series, on the 11th of April at MIOT, where Melbourne Angels will be there. There's one Melbourne Angel here, David Pennant. You can talk to him afterwards. He's an investor, he's a lot of money. So, and we'll be introducing Melbourne Angels officially to the Melbourne Silicon Beach community. So there's a lot of interesting events coming up. So without Karen actually happened to be the 11,000th Silicon Beacher. So this is our gift to Karen having this event. So she's very lucky. We don't have these events unless people sponsor us. So there you are. She's getting it free. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Elise to you, who's the community manager of CoWork Me, to say a few words about CoWork Me, and then Karen and Wes, you can introduce yourself. Thanks. Thanks, Elise.
Hi guys, so like Abdullah said, my name is Elise. I'm the community manager here at CoWork Me. What does that mean? Basically, I do the sales, marketing, communications, and events for our space. So those of you who are not familiar with co-working, we're sort of a place where people come to do work, and people come to network, and people come to build relationships, both personal and professional, with other people. We've got a number of different kind of plans, so everything from 2-day-a-week hot desks where people can just kind of bring your laptop, sit down and work. You can hire out meeting rooms by the hour, kind of all the way up to 15, 20 square meter offices that are hired out on a month-to-month basis. So if anyone's kind of looking for a new home for their business, if you're currently based at home or you're currently in a commercial lease that's ending, I'll be around, happy to give you a tour of the space afterwards or have a chat if that's something you're interested in. So thanks for coming and enjoy the presentation.
Thanks, Elise. Thank you. So thank you all for coming. I'm Karen Finch and this is Wes Young, and we're from Legally Yours, and Wes has got a whole heap of other hats as well that we'll talk about through the discussion. I won't take up too much time just talking about Legally Yours, but I just sort of wanted to give you an understanding because we are something quite unique in the legal industry as it stands. So we're not a law firm, and we think that's pretty great. And the reason we're not a law firm is that, so around about 5 years ago, we saw that there was a real gap in the market where we had a legal industry that had effectively set itself up to not service clients or customers. So even though we are a service industry, we don't see ourselves as, we've almost set ourselves up to be too elite to approach. And there was no really convenient, easy, simple way to engage a lawyer. So what we were finding was I had so many people coming up to me and saying, I've just started a business and I've got so many other costs, so I just downloaded these terms and conditions from the website and just, hoped that I wasn't going to get sued on them. But, I don't even know where to go for a lawyer. And everyone had that nightmare story about, my friend went and saw a lawyer and, sat there and then they got this invoice for $1,000 and, we didn't even know what it was for. So we knew back then that the legal industry had some pretty severe problems, and so we wanted to address it. So what we've actually become now is a fully automated online platform. So all the lawyers that we have signed up as members, and we've got them Australia-wide, they're all fixed fee or value-based pricing. And why that's really important to you is none of them bill by the hour. So can you imagine actually speaking to a lawyer and then telling you an actual price and what you're going to deliver? And that's who we work with in terms of our legal community. And we have two really simple ways that you can actually engage with them. So you can actually, if you're sitting at home and you've got a really quick legal question and you don't want to travel anywhere and you want the lawyer to call you at a time that suits you, you can opt for a quick match call, which is $49, and you can get that legal advice over the phone. But if you're ready to go ahead with, say, terms and conditions or a privacy policy or an actual body of work, you can then request a fixed fee quote. So I'd encourage you to jump online. There's some of our little handles. We do lots and lots of free education. So a really big mission at Legally Yours is we believe by educating people about legal, you'll feel more empowered to engage. And it's quite interesting for us because we've done a lot of work on the touch points of legal in people's lives, and we believe that if we can get people engaging in all those different periods, such as, you know, when you have a baby, doing a will, or you've got a friend that's separating, or buying a property, or starting a business, you'll be more empowered to make the right decisions for you. So that's a bit about Legally Yours. So Wes has recently just joined us as my fellow co-director. And Wes has got a really, really interesting background, so I might just sort of throw it over. But actually, before we do that, Wes and I would really encourage everybody to jump in with questions. So we want to make this as valuable and as useful for all of you. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll talk about it. So we don't mind where this conversation goes, but we really want to make sure that you're getting from it what you need. So Wes, talk to me about your background. So yeah, tell me about that.
So I'm a reformed journalist that then went back and studied law. So I think probably real estate and used car sales might be next. I would have covered off all of the professions that people don't trust or like. Maybe politicians should go in there as well. But my background's commercial law, so working for ASX lists, so public companies. And then one day I was invited to have coffee with a gentleman called Graham Wood, I knew a little bit about. Does everybody sort of know anything about Graham? I'll unpack that a little bit. He's the founder of What If, hotel booking software, sold it to Twitter for more money than God. So got talking with Graham about something completely unrelated, and he rang me that evening and offered me a job running legal and strategy for him across all his business interests. So I guess you would say that was my first pitch, and I never knew I was actually doing it. So I worked with Graham for just on 3 years. Now he has businesses that run from a charitable trust that does a lot of work around environmental issues, through to businesses where he's a majority shareholder in that have gone from startup to now full commercial and returning on investment, and everything in between. They range from software as service, I'm sure we've got a few people in here that are looking at that as a model, through to building and selling widgets, through to just licensing IP, and pretty much everything in between.
Yeah. And so Wes and I have had a little bit of a discussion about his time with Graham Wood, and I think something that a lot of, actually raise of hands of who's actually sort of startup, who's kind of fully into the business, where is most people at, who's sort of just at the beginning of their startup journey?
Who's just got an idea?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And is anyone sort of on the cusp of seeking investment? Is that where the majority of us?
Okay.
Interesting. So one of, I think we'd find really useful is to talk a little bit about that process of pitching, and particularly with Graham. So Graham being an angel investor, what did you observe in terms of how startups would come and how he would select them?
Sure. So Graham, what I'm saying is he's what I would describe as an angel investor and also an impact investor. So the couple of prisms he will look things through is, does what you're proposing make sense from a commercial viewpoint? But then if I buy into this, what's the outcome on a quadruple bottom line approach? So is there an environmental gain? Is there a social gain? Is there some other intangible result that I quite like the look of that's going to incentivise me to do it? And so I was kind of the gatekeeper for this process. And where it gets really interesting, and some of you will be alive with, some of you won't, the number of pitches that used to come over the desk, there was no ask. They tell you all about themselves, what this problem is that they were going to solve, how they were going to do it, but there was no ask. And what I mean by that is like, there was no dollar value, what the proposed terms were, and it got me thinking. And so I sat down with a founder and I said, so look, love this, but there's no ask. Why? I can't get my head around it. So we didn't want to put a number on it because we thought we'd scare you off. And I think it's quite a common problem. The reality is, if you're asking someone for money, like it's no different to going to your bank manager, right? You've actually got to name up what you want so that then the lender can work out the terms. And so we ended up doing some business with this guy after that. And he's like, oh, well, I just thought you'd tell me what you want. I said, well, if you need 500K to get off the ground to commercialise your business, we're not, and we think you only need 50, well, we're just going to do our money, right? Because you're going to be short. So it's really interesting, and it's this thing that you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And so I knew that I was getting frustrated and growing with this, but there's no ask. And these people are like, oh, we said no.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you often refer to that process of seeking investment as a bit of a dark art. And I think, certainly the startups that we see, it's not something you do in your everyday life. So how are you supposed to know? And I think an interesting thing you've mentioned to me previously is that often the pitch itself almost can be a particular test around. So how, I'll give you an example. So how this sometimes works, so that they come, and how Graham likes to do it, and he won't mind saying, is that more often than not, he would like to be the sole investor, which is why it comes back to the earlier point. Give me a number so I know what I'm going to be in for. So you go, right, so now we've agreed on what the number is. For that, I want 51% of your company. And he will justify that as saying, well, I want 51%, so if you start stuffing it up, I can pull my money out before you've squandered it all. And the guy or woman that says, oh, okay, sure, 51%, they probably still won't get the money because it was actually a test. Will you stand your ground? Will you drive a bargain and look the lender in the eye and say, no, I'm worth more than that, this is worth more than that, this is my counter offer? And so there's the psychology in that, and Graham's probably not unusual in that space. That was kind of his additional check and balance to call bullshit on people to see whether they were really serious. So the conversation would start 51-49, and then usually if we ended up to terms, it would be kind of 70-30, with us putting up pretty well capital in most cases of what the company needed. It's interesting. And I know, I think if we take a step back a bit from when you're beginning your startup, often I think, we all have these great ideas, we're going to change the world, or we're going to make something that's going to take the world by storm. And you and I were talking a little bit about, even at that point, really figuring out what your purpose is behind your startup, and understanding that not everyone is in it to change the world.
So, that's an interesting one. So, if I put on my hat when I was working with Catalyze, that they are a VC outfit to look to scale you across 3 years to a global company. The lens that they look across it is it's got to be something that's scalable globally. And to step back, it's like, well, what is the problem you're seeking to solve? Is it a global problem? Is it a problem worth solving? And if you get over all those questions, well, then we continue to talk. But where I come from at home, Tassie, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, but what they're really actually trying to do is set up a lifestyle business. Their entrepreneurial goal is to set up a business that will employ them, give them $100 grand a year and the lifestyle they want, and that's totally fine, right? But you've got to be very clear on what you want going in, especially if you're talking to potential investors.
Absolutely, and I think, added on to that, so it's okay, and it's okay also just to be making it for a quick, because there's other bits, because some people want to create businesses to be bought out by competitors.
And that, some people, there's a view that that's kind of dirty. And I'm totally fine with that too. If your goal is, your business plan is, you've identified a gap in the market, the competitors that could potentially occupy this space have not, we think we can get out there, stake out some ground in 3 years, build out a really little profitable business, and then we'll just sell it out to one of the big boys, and then we'll go do something else and start it again.
Yeah.
And that's equally valid as a model. There's actually, in some ways, it's simpler.
Yes. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think as startups, we don't tend to have that thought process at the beginning. Maybe it kind of morphs over.
There's a lot of
journey.
thought goes into the inputs around the startup. You actually need as much thought going in over here about what an exit looks like.
Yes.
And what does success look like? Because if you know where you are and you know where you want to be, then the logic dictates you can figure out how you're going to get there.
And I think the dichotomy with that is that a lot of startups go in with big dreams, and you don't want to even think to sort of think there that you're going to make it to that big. There's almost a shyness around, which might sort of lead into why we sometimes typically have a problem about the ask.
Yeah.
Because, and also a lot of us have probably been working, without being paid. You pour everything into your business, so then how do you value that kind of stuff? But from your experience in seeing it through, obviously an angel investor, but also with Catalyze on the VC side, those are really important thoughts to have right at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you've got a real clarity of purpose in terms of the idea and where you want to go, how you're going to get there, along with some actual validation that this is actually commercial, you can make it pay its way. You're actually halfway there. I don't know, who here's watched South Park? Right? You watch South Park? I don't know if you remember the episode. It's this great thing with Cartman decides he wants to be an entrepreneur. And like step 1 is steal underpants. ? Step 3 is profit. Like there's no thought being given to the middle bit about how we actually commercialise the proposal to actually make it pay its way. And that's been really true. If you look at some of the social media stories, free membership base, everybody piles on. It's like, oh great, how are we going to make money? And that's what's got us into the mess we're in now with, for example, with Facebook around privacy and data. Because the only way that platform can make money is if they mine your information. And I think that's a conversation for another day, because the pendulum's going to come back the other way. But Zuckerberg's idea was just to connect people. There wasn't actually a commercial purpose. That was bolted on later on and is now creating some problems.
Yeah. And that probably leads us on to a good
But Google's the same.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, they all are. They all are. So
No.
I think,
No, they're not.
I'm saying it's general.
No, those two stand out.
Yeah, they're all very data heavy, and the only way they make money is through the data, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we were talking about this earlier today, I think data is the new coal. I don't mean that the way that you think it is. Like the Industrial Revolution was built off the back of cheap, reliable energy, which is provided by coal. The post-industrial revolution, where we are now, the success stories are built off cheap, reliable data. That they can actually predict your buying habits. And that informs the targeted advertising, and on it goes.
Yeah.
So, he won't mind me saying. So, a friend of mine who's the chairman of Catalyze, he decided he wanted a new car. Right? He really liked the new Audi, and he knew he's savvy enough where I am Audi's target client customer. And he went to Audi and said, "I want one of those, and I want you to give it to me. I'm not going to buy it. I want you to give it to me." Mad. He went, "No, I will give you my last 12 months internet browsing activity, unedited, for free, so you can data mine that to look at my habits, because I'm the type of person you've identified that want an Audi." They gave him an Audi.
Wow. Alright, I'll go to the next dealership, see what
Yeah,
on my
it
browser.
depends on what your viewing habits
Yes,
are
okay.
online, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Could you just clarify there was a gap? You were in Graham Wood and now you are legally yours.
So
We're
I
gonna
think,
talk
so
about it.
yeah, we're going to get to that. So I finished up, I still do contract work with Graham. I was full-time with Graham for 3 years. I came on at Legally Yours. I'm a director, I'm an executive director at Legally Yours, so I'm not an employee per se, whereas I was an employee with Graham. Does that answer the
And where
question?
did the Catalyze?
So Catalyze, I'm a director of Catalyze. So Catalyze is a global VC outfit. I think we're in about 9 countries now. Catalyze.com, spelled with 2 I's, Z-E. So they work with scaling businesses, normally about 1 to 200k revenue, with a view to taking them to about 10 million across 3 years. So a lot of these is tech, software as service type stuff, not so much actually building or selling things,
Yeah.
a little bit of licensing.
Yeah. And I guess what would be helpful, so we can sort of, because this is about the ABCs of scaling and understanding kind of attracting the right investment. So what we've sort of said is, you know, if you're having those sorts of thought processes at the beginning about what your purpose is in this actual startup and where you want it to go, so dream big, I guess. And then from there, there's probably a whole you need to identify the kind of investment that you want, because there are different types of investment. It's not just always cash.
Yeah, correct. So if you look at the Graham model, we'll call it an angel or an impact, and the catalysed VC model, they can both give you cash, but there's more to it than that. And the way that the catalysed model works is that they can get you the cash, but they also bring in human capital with it as well, because quite often what we've seen people learn the hard way is they get the cash, and then the next thing they do is they hire people that they trust to help spend the money, which is normally people they already know, who are probably more often than not the right people. And so they get 12 months down the road, they've blown the cash, and they're not really any further progressed on where they want to get to that self-generation. So you need to have a think about that. So, you know, if you were working with Graham and he gave you money, well, he would probably put someone on the board with having done a skills matrix of the founder and the other key partners. Like, what do you need? So, for example, we've got one at home. I've done some work with this guy. He's a savant when it comes to coding, because it's a software as service thing. But he won't mind me saying this, like his name, he's mildly autistic, so he's not very sociable. So his big problem is sales. He's got customers knocking on his door because his products, it's very niche. It sells to government. It's around water quality, actually, funnily enough. But his flaw or his weakness in his model is that he doesn't have someone who can go and sell. And so he doesn't need to build a social media following, or it's a relatively simple model. So he gets some cash, and he gets the lion's share of that goes to employing a salesman.
And who hires the salesman?
He'll do it he'll get the last say that he will do it buying from the investor. It's not ideas like, here's some people that are in the market, you should go and have a talk to. There's got to be a good cultural fit, a good personal fit, because you're going to be working hand in glove, right? And ultimately the founder runs the company, so they've got to make the decision, but you can certainly help them guide.
That's right. And so it's really important, I guess, yes, you make the decision about what kind of investment you want, and not if it shouldn't just purely be that cash, it should also be about what an investor can bring to you.
Sometimes they bring access to their network, that's
absolutely,
right.
Absolutely, yeah, and someone that's quite values aligned. I know that in the world that we've operated in, we talk a lot about you date your investor, and I don't mean that in the way that it sounds, but you get to know them to make sure that you're both on the same page, that you're both wanting the same things, because unfortunately in the space that I work in legal, we see a lot of startups fail, and a lot of startups fail in, potentially when an investor's come in and then they've either given away too many equity, or, we see those situations. Yeah, happening.
So you can only sell equity once, right?
Yeah.
More speaking. So you've really got to know your audience. So, if you look at an impact investor who's also, say, a philanthropist, you wouldn't go and pitch to them clean cold, right? Because they call BS on it. But if you were pitching a water quality product, well, their ears are going to prick up because they're ideologically aligned. It's the same with if if it's a software patch or software as service or something like that, you want to pitch it to somebody that knows that field, and that's what we see with Graham a lot, because he's walked the road that a lot of new people are on now, so he gets the highs, he gets the lows, and if it's a similar product to what his interest and experience is, well, he's instantly going to be more interested in engaging with you, and you can also mine him for knowledge.
Yeah.
So it really is a give and take.
Yes, and he has an interesting story, because I think he wrote What If in 3 days or something.
Yeah, so across a weekend and a Monday afternoon, I think the story goes, the hard thing for him was actually getting the first 10 hotel chains to sign up to it, because you've got to remember that this is early 2000, so the internet is not what it is now, and internet sales was not what it is now. So he firstly had to explain what is the internet, and then why you need to be selling onto it.
Yeah.
And he was smart enough to know that he could be first and get out there and stake out a claim, but it probably wasn't going to be long until somebody else started. We were talking, you now got Trivago, Booking.com, and on and on
Two.
it goes.
Yeah.
There's only two.
And two?
But on everything.
Yeah.
Expedia and Priceline.
Yes.
Yeah.
But his plan was very simple. It was to, right, gap in the market, stake it out, commercialise it, put up a for sale sign, get out.
Yeah.
And that was the plan.
Yes. And then he did it again with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then he did it again. He created a music review and streaming platform. I think it was called We Are Hunted, and he sold that to Twitter again because he had an existing relationship and for equally silly money. And then a few months after he sold it, Apple launched iTunes. So it was overnight, it died.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So did the What If guy patent anything?
I think that from memory around What If there was some coding and an algorithm in it that there was IP. We probably should turn the conversation to IP. Actually, you get a T-shirt for that. That was a very good question. To stop me rabbiting on. So IP is something that investors always tend to look at, and the number of times we go, oh, I've got a patent. Like, great. For what? Why? And you've got to come back a step and say, well, what is the strategy behind why you've done that? So I work with a company and they created a bolt-on platform for computer games where you can customise the soundscape. So 100,000 unique sounds in their library, they've created them all. There's an algorithm and an app that sits behind this. And when I started having a conversation about IP with them, they said, oh, no, we're covered. And I went, oh, great. Yeah, we've registered the business name. Hang on.
Wow.
I think you've missed a step here somewhere.
Yeah.
So we went back to first principles and we said, right, what's the critical part of this business? And it was the algorithm that sat within the app. And they'd actually outsourced the development of that. And the IP was still sitting with the couple of guys in Kazakhstan that had done it. Hadn't been brought into the company itself. So that had to be brought in. Then we could actually protect the IP because we owned it. Because we figured if we had control of the app and the algorithms in it, it was very hard for a competitor to get the jump on us because that was the key piece of genius that made it all work. We were prepared to say, well, if someone wants to steal our sound library, bits of it, so what? We can just make something else. We're not going to spend a few $100 a throw on trying to trademark sounds, but we can lock up the IP around the algorithm in the app, and that was the strategic plan that governed what we did with the IP. So some people look at it the other way, and founders, I think, fall into two loose categories. One is they will IP everything as soon, or try to, as soon as they've come up with something.
Very lean startup that.
Yeah, right. You've hit the nail on the head. And they stay awake at night worrying about someone stealing their idea. And the other school of thought is, oh yeah, we'll worry about that once we've got the money, then we'll do it. And both are equally fraught for different reasons. If there's a Goldilocks zone in the middle you've got to find, and there's no one answer to this, right? Because it depends on what IP you've brought in to business, what you've created, and how critical is it to what you're doing. So this guy with the computer gaming, if they lost the app, then the show is over because that's the value proposition for the business. I think they'd spent $100,000 on developing that from inception, coding, commercialisation through. That's the value proposition of the company.
And I think you've made a really good point because there has to be a strategy behind what you're protecting, because I think that the general sort of knowledge or understanding of intellectual property is that if you just register and trademark and put your patent application in and then you're fine. But if you haven't understood, you could have registered or patented the wrong piece. So it's, it's something that you do need
if your IP
think about.
trademark it in the wrong category or somebody else mirrors what you're doing registers it in a different category, you just don't really have any recourse.
Yeah.
Or if it's a patent and then somebody takes what you've done, tweaks it a bit, and then registers it as a new thing, you're still caught.
Yes.
I saw some data the other day touching on this, that if this perception that if you don't IP protect and someone steals your idea, that they're going to get some kind of head start. I forget, it was one of the US unis that did this work, that they looked at some examples of that, and the cost for the company that had pirated the IP was still about 70% of the company that had actually developed it from inception. So it's actually not really that quicker route to market. Yes, you'll say it's 30%, but the timelines are still much the same.
Yeah.
So you've really got to nail down like what is the IP that's mission critical to what I'm doing.
Yes.
So for you, it might actually be a patent around what you're bolting onto the AC. For someone else, it might be full.
Yeah.
So with something like that, so we've developed a platform. I'm not a coder. I'm guessing there's probably no amazing algorithm in what we're doing and how we're using it for. So I don't see where we would be able to. I mean, we've trademarked, but I don't know how would we possibly protect any of that IP
Yeah, so
within that.
really good question. So
Or do we even teach?
yeah, you can have a t-shirt. It might be as simple as, you know,
One size fits all.
oh no,
We can
look,
chat
multiple
to
sizes.
that.
Yeah, the moral here is that one size does not fit all.
It's nice now. I'm looking
No,
for
it's
sausage.
It's all bespoke. You might find that the best option for you is that, you know, well, are you a sole trader or are you incorporated? So, because if you're incorporated, you get the bonus protection of your company name being a registered business.
Oh yes, that's the type of thing, but not within the actual.
But in terms of the
tech
actual
itself.
tech IP,
Yeah.
if you've got just a generic Wix website or something like that, you might be down to something as simple as copyright on the content within it, because it's not new or bespoke, and that is a risk you run. I mean, the other potential risk you have is you want to lock up domain names that are similar to yours. So with all the different suffixes, because somebody else can grab those and try and carve market share away from you.
So not to steer this towards IP too much.
You're not
this was
t-shirt,
about-
ain't you?
this was about investment pitching and stuff like that. But with regards to IP, do you have any advice for someone looking at the alternative, which is proprietary software, for example? So proprietary software versus patenting.
Yeah, look, good question. I probably need to know a bit more about what you're doing without wanting to sound like I'm calling out. But I mean, the patent road is long and it's expensive. And even then, you still have issues. And I think I read somewhere that the innovation patent option is disappearing in Australia in the near future, which makes things a bit more difficult again.
Especially for software.
Yeah. Yeah, because in that space, things are only getting quicker, right? It's not slowing down. So you might get to a point where you're ready to commercialise and somebody else is already onto the next thing. And that's the risk we all run in this space. So I guess, I'm happy to take that offline and have a chat with you afterwards.
I think part of that is, so we've sort of identified that not one model fits all, but you can do certain things like actually looking at purpose. There's certain legal things that you can put into place to kind of protect. I know investors down the track do look at your data room and different things to see what kind of information you've got collected in there and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the other thing that you and I have always talked about is that there has to be an element of a little bit of a futurist about the entrepreneur. So really understanding the trend of your market, because, you know, Graham, for instance, he was first to market and then he was going to sell out. But yeah, just sort of understanding then where, because we see a lot of startups who have these great ideas and then 12 months, 2 years down the track realise that someone else has been doing exactly the same thing, and it becomes...
Yeah, so you've got to get this sweet spot right, where you've got the market is moving to where you think it's going to go. The technology is there to let you capitalise on that. So the example I give you where it's really worked, we go back, showing my age a little bit. I can remember when I could get online and order a DVD from Netflix, and turn up in the post. Right? Who can remember that? Yeah, I'm seeing some nodding, because we were joking about this, you know, like I remember I had this date lined up, we were going to watch Die Hard 31, and went down to the video, down to Blockbuster, the three versions of it they had, copies out. So, you know, blind night. But with the Netflix model, you could order it, you knew it was going to turn up, but that was still quite clunky. But it was kind of working because it was still better than the traditional model of walking down to Blockbuster, because people were time poor, probably more time poor now. Fast forward, and the internet has evolved through bandwidth and delivery to now you can, not through Netflix, obviously you can stream. So suddenly their business model evolved from being predicated on postage to actually delivering it online. And the irony here is, I think not once but twice Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix and they said no. So Blockbuster could have bought Netflix for $50 million and they said, no, you're asking too much. So there's now no Blockbuster, and what's Netflix worth? It's, you know, the multiples of billions. But my point is that Netflix could have gone the other way if the technology hadn't caught up. If they just stayed in that space of hard mailing you out a DVD, you might have found that Blockbuster could have actually come back from that. They could have, through better service delivery, you know, fought that on their turf. Because the technology continued to move, that now I can enjoy whatever movie I want without even leaving the house.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you raised the sweet spot. So, and I think, you know, that's got so many elements tied up into it, because it is to do with timing, it's to do with finding the right investment. You know, we've had a little talk online in one of our pre-chat series about identifying a demon investor from an angel investor, which we've kind of sort of covered in the sense of, if you understand where you want your startup to go and what your purpose is behind, you can very easily identify. And when I say demon investor, I don't mean that in the sense that someone is specifically trying to you know, make your startup, suffocate your startup. But interestingly, there is this other undercurrent of investment that we haven't talked about, where, and I'll, you know, this is just sort of more of a side note, where we're seeing a lot of these consulting firms acquiring startups so that their competition don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you sort of,
Yeah, well, that's not new, unfortunately.
No.
I think we were talking about Deloitte, weren't we? I think,
Yeah.
in that context. You know, the automotive industry has done that for years, and again, that is a legitimate option. If you want to create something, take it to market, and then your competitor goes, well, don't like the look of that, I'll buy that to make it go away, and you exit. Well, fine.
Yeah.
But you need to be kind of alive to that's the plan,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And be happy that your baby gets put in a drawer somewhere and nothing ever happens
Yeah.
with it, ever.
Yes, yeah, okay. So this probably then leads us to, because you founded a business called SmartUp. So tell us all about SmartUp, because if I'm right, SmartUp is really about you being able to help founders get to the sweet spot.
So time for the shameless plug. So SmartUp does two things. So one, I can work with, it's all fixed price, it's totally yours. I can work with a founder and say, I'll take a helicopter view of your business and say, that, and that, we need to fix that because you're not investor ready. So for example, you don't have a formalised shareholder agreement with your founders, you're still a sole trader, you're not incorporated, there's a checklist to go through. And that's relatively formulaic in terms of just bedding down some good governance, because that gives a level of comfort to investors if they look at the founder and go, oh yeah, they've actually got some really good frameworks around how they're running their company, checks and balances. I like that, looks professional, so my comfort level increases. And then the flip side of that is what I do for investors is I look at founders again against the same checklist and go, they haven't got that, they haven't got that, they haven't got that. That could be a problem.
Yeah. And also through that service, you sort of almost have a kind of a mentoring bit with it as well.
Yeah, so it works on the back end that you can ring me and we'll be locking appointments for the following 12 months from doing the engagement, because it's a journey, right? It's, so I just did one with an outfit, and their model is cutting out the middleman between musician and the audience, so for concerts. So that normally what happens is the artist has to go through a promoter who books the venue, clips the ticket, then organises the concert. This model cuts out the promoter. The artist can directly book the venue and through the startup organise the promotion, and they don't have to clip the ticket.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at that through the prism of a potential investor. And the guy who was the founder is one out of the box. He's a DJ and investment banker. Yeah, I know, it does my head in too. So when I stuck my head inside the data room and inside the company, everything was just as it should be. It was great. It's like, oh look, you've got a bespoke constitution there, you're not relying on the replaceable rules. Oh look, you've got a founders agreement and you've nailed down what the shareholding is for the two founders. And on it went, and they ended up getting money.
Yeah, wow.
Because they were very clear on what the model was, what the market was, and they had all that stuff behind them. They also had a really hot pitch deck, which never hurts, right?
Yes.
Never hurts at all.
And that's a good segue, which we'll probably finish on and open up the floor to questions. But pitching, so MSP do a lot of pitch nights, one of which I did the other week, where I did a 90-second pitch, and it was nerve-wracking as hell, and kind of trying to think about how do I summarise.
Then you haven't done enough pitches.
Yeah. Well, I think you're
They should be
100%
boring.
right. You're 100% right. But I think the energy's good. I hope I never lose the butterflies with it. But yeah, trying to condense your business down to 90 seconds was intense. But I think what we spoke about today, when you pitch to an investor, it's quite a different. It's a different pitch, and there's probably no one really that guides you. You almost learn by baptism of fire.
Yeah, it's almost to learn by failure.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really hard to get a read. Like, if we circle back to Graham, and I just get shits and giggles out of this, because Graham's an internet entrepreneur / pioneer, not on any social media. Foundation doesn't have a website.
Yeah.
He's just a ghost
Yes.
online. So it's very hard to actually get a read on the guy and his interests to actually, before you get that FaceTime. And if you leave here with nothing else tonight, is if you're going to sit down with an investor, whether they're a VC, an angel, whatever, do the homework on what their interests are, what the red flags are for them, so that you can increase their level of comfort and alignment between what you're proposing and what they're happy to do.
I think that's a mistake, by the way, what he's doing. I have a personal website because I want somebody to be able to find me and know what I like and what I'm interested in.
Yeah, well,
For that
look,
purpose
I think
only.
you're right.
It doesn't have to be real.
No,
I'm on LinkedIn
I
for that
guess-
purpose only.
Yeah.
If Graham was here, I think his answer would be, that's what I pay him for.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
And it depends. You're right, because there's no one answer to this, but I just find it deeply amusing.
It is, yeah. It's very fun.
Could I just ask,
Yes.
what follows on from what you were saying a bit earlier? I'm really particularly interested. I understand Graham taking you said about a 30% interest in investments of the order of $500,000, and he probably puts in a bit more in some. And that part I understand well, because that's what we do. What I'm interested in, what does he do next? I'm interested in what does he do with the company that is actually tracking well, but needs more capital.
So you're saying, what does he do if it needs more capital after we've bought in?
Yeah, I mean, it runs, you give them $500,000, it gives them 18 months, 2 years runway, whatever it is. And they've grown the business nicely, and they may even have some revenues, but the revenues are well short of profitability, and they need actually more money to grow the business. What do you do when they need
I think the
another
answer-
billion or two or three?
Did you wanted a t-shirt?
No, don't be please.
Look, I think so, dealing in generics here, I think if the company was on the uptick and we thought the business proposition was sound and still sound, then Graham will have seen it, we'd go back again and put in some more money, if the business case was there to justify.
So he would follow on.
Yeah.
In
Ra-
exchange
rather
for more
than-
equity or?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
always,
yeah.
yes. But rather than look for another kind of investor.
Yeah, so we did that with the computer game one. So there was an initial line, and that went pretty well. But to get it to the next level where we wanted it to ago, it needed more money. And the founder went away and did the numbers and made a business case and came back to us as the principal investor and said, look, what do you reckon? And we looked at it and we got some external advice from our number crunchers, and it seems pretty conservative what they're saying. So we went back and gave them more money. And you're right, we took a slightly bigger stake through the second tranche of equity. But that company, about 3 months after we did that, signed a licensing agreement with Dungeons and Dragons. So that's big. So that was a big number, that one.
And how does that compare then to what Catalyze do? Because they do it quite differently, don't they? So they've got sort of where they grow, and it's a smaller percentage, and it's not necessarily.
So Catalyze doesn't, they're not the VC, the bank themselves, they're the catalyst tends to play on words, quite the intermediary, and their business model in that space is predicated on flipping the ticket. So this is the difference between an angel investor and the VC. The VC is very much about the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
They will look at a screen here and go, well, what's going to give me the best rate of return? The ideology and the alignment doesn't really come into it so much, but then it's about, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But you've got to be aware of that. So if that's the audience you're speaking to, you better well be on paper be the most profitable founder in the room, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
We've been told like a number of times, we're just beginning to sort of this journey now, is that so many people have said to us, unless you absolutely have to, do not go the VC route, because they've seen so many people burn, so many founders
Look, I
lose
agree.
everything.
I agree.
Yeah.
And in people, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? So it's like, well, we need 500 grand. Well, the easy way is to try and go and hit someone up for 500 grand, but it's equally possible to go and find 5 people to get 100 grand each, or potentially land a contract for 500 grand and bootstrap it. There's more than one way to do this, right? And the thing with any of those approaches, you've actually got to think about what's the price for what you're getting. Like if you're getting the 500 grand but you're giving away 51% of the equity, like, is the price actually too high for the transaction? And that's something you've really got to think on. And sometimes it's really easy to see the check in front of you and go, and grab it. But actually, this is where the demon investor thing comes in. They totally believe in what you're selling, but they think it's worth way more than the price tag you've got on it.
Can I just add to what you've said? The ordinary reason that VC money has turned out badly for people is because of the terms on which it's given.
Yeah.
VCs write a term sheet,
Yeah.
which has a series of terms that are extremely favourable to them in protecting their interests,
Yeah.
particularly if things go bad.
Yeah.
So, so that's what you sign up for with VC. And the question is, where else do you go? Well, obviously, the Graham Woods of this world is one place that you go, rather than. So my question there was, what kind of terms is this investment given on? You said kind of 30%, but what other terms does
Well, normally, so there's the terms around the equity stake, and then there's the terms on how long before we think we're going to start seeing a return. And that really depends. There's no one answer to that on the brain. Sometimes we think we'll see it in 12 months because we think it's a relatively short trip to market. Sometimes other things we're working on, it's a decade. But if we say it's a decade and that they're ready to start making for us to get a return on investment in 6 or 8 years, happy days, right? So Graham is in the luxurious position of also having patient capital, in that he's prepared to kind of play the long game on some of this stuff, but it's speculation at the end of the day, isn't it?
But does he have terms that would prevent the investing company from suddenly saying, look, I'm going to get some money from these guys over here because I don't like you any longer, I want to go over and get some investment.
So the only example of that I would give you would be the general answer to that is no, but the exception to the rule is Graham we wouldn't be involved in a company that then sourced additional capital from what Graham deemed as a less than reputable source. So if that is something non-ideologically aligned to Graham. So I don't know, let's say it's health tech or something, and Graham put money, and then they were offered money from a bloody tobacco company or something like that. So Graham, if Graham, how do I explain? So if we're just trying to the philanthropic space with Graham for a second, he works on the 30% rule. He will to donate to something in the philanthropic space, he will give you 30% of what the headline figure is to do whatever it is. So let's say it's to save the barrier reef, right?
To launch pro bono.
Or to launch pro bono, he'll give you 30%, and then the onus, and then 30%, there it is. If you can then go and get another 30% from somewhere else, he will then more often than not give you access to an additional tranche, which is you've shown that you can leverage what he's already given you. Does that make sense? So he's investing in you, he's showing faith, but he's also incentivizing you. And if you can actually take that money he's giving you and then go, hey look, Graham Wood reckons that this is a good investment, he's put the money in, and then someone else wants to match it or equally buy him, he's more than happy with that, with the caveat being that it has to be ideologically and values aligned. And I mean, Graham's a bit unusual in that sense, but I still think it's really good business because you don't want a values non-aligned bunch of final shareholders or directors, because it's not going to end up working very well.
Yeah. And investment can be good because ultimately, if you've got the right timing and you've understood your purpose and you know that the timing's now, the investment can be then. I mean, there's that wonderful story by Jeff from Amazon that talks about he sold 20% of his company for $1 million, and someone came back and said, oh, you must hate, why did you do that? You must regret that. And he said, well, absolutely not, because it was with that first investment.
They're all friends.
They're all friends. So it's sometimes it's a real balance. And I think, if we go back to the topic of tonight, I think probably what the advice that both Wes and I wanted to leave everyone in the room with is, definitely the A for the ABC is to really make sure that you understand your purpose as the startup and really take the time, because I think in startups we spend so much time in our business and working on our business, but we don't actually take time to stop and say, why am I doing this? So find your purpose, and from the purpose you find then where you want it to grow. And it doesn't, as we've sort of discussed, you don't have to be saving the world. You might just want to have a really cool product and sell for lots of money. So, and that's okay. So understanding that, and then B, understanding all those sorts of things that you can do right at the beginning, like, and certainly we can help you at Legally Yours, and Wes can help you through Smart Up about, whether you incorporate, protecting your IP, all those sorts of things. So I know they're not the exciting things to do in your startup, they're often the tedious, boring things, but they're sometimes the things that then end up getting you the money down the track. So you need to have them. And then I think C for us would really be always understand what sort of investment you need to get that's going to be right for you. So it's not always going to be purely cash. It might be purely cash. It might be with a sole angel investor. It might be with a group of angel investors.
That incorporation thing, it's not very sexy, but it really is critical. And the reason I'll tell you it's critical is there's two reasons. One is if you're a sole trader, how do you allocate equity in what you're doing? You're just a sole trader, as opposed to a company structure where you can allocate the shareholding. And two, if you're a startup, you really want to be incorporated more often than not, because you get this thing called a corporate fail. So that if your startup fails, you don't lose your house.
Yeah.
Right? So
And they're cheap,
yes.
Yeah.
So
about $450 or something.
yeah, I think yes.
I forget the figure,
Yeah,
but around
launching
that.
fees about that, and there's a couple of online portals that pretty much automate the whole thing for you. So for me, it's a no-brainer, right? So you protect your primary asset, which for most of us is your house, and you've actually ticked a critical box in getting yourself investment ready.
Yeah. So are there any questions that anyone wanted to have? I'll take it. Yep.
Okay, I will try to explain one question. I hope you understand. So we're speaking about, let's give example. I send one pager, I have the MVP, all the stuff, I'm going to the pitch. How much the VC or angel looking about the idea against the team? Because let's say the truth, most of the startup that they start, they change the way when they work. You know,
Yeah.
like startups say I'm working for one thing, and in the end it's another thing. But there is a good team behind it, and I think that this is advantage for VC or angel, or that they have a lot of people that they know and a lot of collaboration that can make. How VC or angel look about the idea against the people behind it?
Yeah, okay, so look, my experience with that, and I'll use the capitalise model here, is one of the first things that they do when they are looking to onboard a company is they actually do a capability assessment of the founder. And they do that before they actually pressure test the idea and the business model. Because you might find that the idea and the business model is relatively sound, it's tweaking, but the founder is not the person to deliver it. And that's where the human capital equation comes in, of supporting that founder to do what we talked about earlier. So I think in answer to your question, you're actually looking as an investor, you're actually investing in the person, the founder, to deliver the idea. So you've actually got to have great faith in you as an individual. Either are going to be able to be in a position to deliver it yourself, or you've got the knowledge and expertise around you to bring it about. And the last bit of that equation is that you've actually got all that locked up in some kind of agreement. Because the last thing you want is, I put money into your startup, there's an argument between the two founders, one of them walks, I'm left with the startup, but the smart guy's the one over there who's now off doing something else.
Is it true that investors don't like 50-50 shareholding with founders? Is that, like if you had a co-founder agreement where it's 50-50, they tend to like to have someone in control? Or is that just one of the myths out there that I've heard?
Depends.
Yeah.
It depends on the investor, it depends on the company. They probably would be relatively happy in the sense of if it was a 50-50 shareholding and then the investor comes in and takes, say, 10% off each or something like that. But in terms of the operation of the company, you've got to have a pretty clearly defined hierarchy. And so, for example, a red flag for me is when the chairman and the CEO are the same person, because one should act as a check and a balance on the other. And I know startups are very lean, and you don't, or sometimes we all wear like 8 hats, you know, where you're the chairman, CEO, and the cleaner, and the caterer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, videographer.
Videographer.
Yeah.
So you've got to get that right. So I don't think the equity holding per se is an issue, but how you structure responsibility and accountability can be.
If your investors aren't very experienced and it's their first time in the game, what can you do to protect yourself and make sure you do things correctly?
Good question. Did you want a t-shirt?
I think that is, he gets definitely a t-shirt. So, right, so there's two things to this. If you're the founder, you need to be totally transparent and upfront with what the offering is, and you need to almost create something like a data room where all of that material is there. And then you need to be very upfront, and this is even more so if it's that investor is new in this space and they're potentially an acquaintance outside of the investment space. You need to be really clear with them that they need to seek legal and financial advice and oversight of this. And, you know, shameless plug, that's my bread and butter, right? Because that then makes the relationship work. So quite often people can get confused. Oh, well, his lawyers have looked at it and it's all fine. Well, no, his lawyers are working for him. They're not working for you. So that would be my advice to you in that space: is play everything with a straight bat, but always say, look, you need to go and get the numbers pressure tested, go and get the legals pressure tested. You could do some due diligence as well, just to make sure, for example, that the company is actually incorporated. So you can do a free company search with ASIC, or you just get me to do it. You know, insurances, all that sort of stuff. So that would be how I would play it. There was a question over here?
It's two related questions. So let's say you're a founder and you haven't found the right team, because that's very important.
Yep.
And you're on your own, but would you consider that as not being investor ready? And secondly, what if the founder has a panel of very experienced advisors and they have small equity? Is that considered better than
So
and being
if
a
you've
founder?
if you've got a really great idea and the commercial plan is sound,
Yeah.
or it looks sound, and you've got the experience and skills to deliver it, I don't think the fact that you don't have a team around or under you
Yeah.
is necessarily a deal breaker, because that's part of what the investment can deliver. You can say, right, I need a COO, I need someone that's really good at socials, I need someone that can sell ice to Eskimos, because that's part of my path to market. And you go, okay, great. But the worst would be was like if the investor goes, well, you don't have a COO, you don't have a path to market, you don't have anyone good on socials, and you go, oh, well, I kind of haven't looked at that, I just do it myself.
Yeah.
So it's knowing what you want. Right?
And again, it probably comes back to who you're asking for
Yeah.
the investment for,
Yeah.
as well. We actually partnered with Asia Law Network, which is Asia's largest legal network of lawyers.
Yeah.
And they had an interesting pathway, because we all started at the same time back in 2014 with a mission for greater accessibility to legal services, but they came at it from a technology point of view, and we came at it from being a lawyer point of view. So, but just knowing from their journey of seeking investment in Asia, it's quite different, because the first thing they were asked in their journey early on when they were seeking investment was always, we don't want just one of you, we want a team of you. So again, it comes back to who you're seeking the investment from, and where they were looking in Singapore, that was of vital importance. So they did look at the board of advisors that were sitting around the CEO there to sort of say, well, who's supporting you? Because if you go off and get sick, or you're in a car accident and you can't work, well, our investment's gone.
Yeah, and that,
So yeah, it kind of depends on who you're, again, back to that whole thing of who is the investor that you're looking
and
for.
depending on where you are in the journey, like there's a really good outfit called the Advisory Board Centre, whose bread and butter is providing access to certified advisors, and it's a bit like a shop. You know, you can go in there and you can actually troll the profiles, and then no obligation. And if you like the look of it, well, one of them, you can sound them out about setting up an advisory board. Of course, you've got to have the revenue or equity or some other incentive to get them to do it, but it's certainly an option there.
Now I'm just mindful of time, because it is 6:53. So as everyone, if people want to leave, I'm happy to keep the conversation going, but if you do need to leave, I do understand we've run significantly over time.
Yep.
But you okay? Yep, we'll take a question.
Just quickly.
Yeah.
I'm in talks with an investor right now who believes in the idea.
Yep.
And has asked me to go out and essentially prove that it works. Whereas I am kind of in a rock and a hard place then, because I want to launch it properly and don't want to jeopardize getting the brand out there and everything and not having the capital backing to do so, but then have to prove that it can generate sales at the same time. So I'm wondering if that's kind of like a popular.
Without giving away your idea,
Yeah.
is it something that you can do a beta test on?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is?
Yeah, I could do kind of like a micro, like a very targeted launch, if that's what you're meaning. Like.
Yeah, I'm thinking, because I totally get where you're coming from, that you want to have a formal type launch and drop it and do all sorts of amazing media and leverage off it, which of course goes up in smoke if you do it the other way. So look, I'd do a pitched idea of a beta test. If that's something that you think can work for your idea without giving it away.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess what I was kind of just thinking is, once that beta launches, is that kind of like a soft launch of the company, which you create this expectation with the people that are using it. Then with that, that
It's just quite
expect the
small.
service
Did you do the NDAs? Everyone signed NDAs?
Well, yeah, so one I had a bit to do with was a company launched a website, and what they do is gamers upload their computer game that they've designed in their garage at home. And people can play it on there, comment, offer feedback, with the view to this model being that the big players then look at that, as in companies look at that and go, oh, that game idea looks really hot, we'll buy that, and it acts as a beta test for them before they try and buy the license for that to commercialise it globally. But part of we did was we actually beta tested the website idea first before we even launched it. So we created it, but it wasn't actually online. We gave everybody a sign-in code, and we only made it available as a subscription to a certain number of gamers from around the place that we'd identified as influencers, and they went on there and tried it, and they really liked it, and that informed the data for the beta test before it went.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
And is there another
Maybe-
question?
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
Is there any list of red flags that you mentioned that if CEO and founder is the same guy, that's a red flag to you? So is there any list of those things which you absolutely crosses the
I
possibility?
might be asking the wrong bloke, but look, there's no one answer to this. So I think you've got to have, like we talked about CEO and chair, you've got to have a really clear business plan in terms of what is the deliverable, where is it positioned in the market. And the number of times I've heard people say, oh, we don't have any competitors. And just call BS on that straight away, that there always is, even if they're not actually in that space yet, because if they see you in that space and you're making money, and it's something that they can tool up and move into relatively quickly, they will do it, right? You've got to have those governance things we talked about and a strategic plan. And the business plan and the strategic plan doesn't have to be a 20-page thing. It's not Tolstoy. It can be a plan on the page, right? But it also is something that the headline of should be in the pitch deck, right? Those things making the notes.
And I think that kind of brings it into focus.
Yeah.
That, it is a bit of a dark art, and we don't typically understand. And I think, what I've certainly observed over the time that I've sort of been in this space is that a lot of startups, when they're going, it is just a baptism of fire, and you actually learn your experience through the failure of not getting the money. But I guess what we kind of here to say, and what I really love, so a form of disclosure here. So Wes actually and I started working together on Legally Yours as Wes being Smart Up. And then obviously he decided Legally Yours was pretty awesome, so he came on board as my co-director. But what I fell in love with what Wes was offering was the fact that there isn't, it's such an unknown territory, and I think that we sometimes are paralysed, and founders are paralysed about, there's so much going on. You don't know where you're supposed to look. You're busy actually trying to make a business, like you've just said. You're supposed to be proving the case, but how can I do that without the money?
Yeah.
It becomes a real minefield. And so what I really liked about, or love about what Wes Smart Up does, is that it gives you someone's experience to look at it from beyond yours, so you can actually navigate through, because like you say, how do you know if you don't know?
Yeah.
After the first 50 pitches, you'll know.
Right, yes,
Because
okay, or you can just
in this kind of startup grind before you go to business mode, so it's like entrepreneur mode, which is from inception to startup to self-generation, and then you're in business mode, right? You've got to everybody's wearing so many hats, we were just joking about it, right? But you've got to spend time not just working in business, but working on the business. And the stuff that ticks the red flags is when you've failed to work on the business more often than not, because you're too busy. It's like the axeman that's too busy to stop and sharpen his axe, right? I've got to get this. No, it's no, not axeman, right? Like lumberjack. So you've got to. You're weird. You've got to, they're so focused on trying to get revenue in, sign clients that are on the hamster wheel, that they actually don't step back and go, oh, there's this really important stuff here that's got to get done, because that'll let me take it to the next level. And sometimes it's as simple as someone just giving a tap on the shoulder and saying, hey mate, like this, you need to fix it.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you don't know, and sometimes if you're operating down here all the time in the trenches, trying to pay the rent, and all this sort of stuff, you don't have the luxury of standing back here and looking down and saying, oh, the idea of a constitution or incorporating seems like a luxury and a cost. I don't need that right now.
With that, I'll stop the recording. You can keep networking and asking questions. I will share the recording with you all through the meetup. Okay. Thanks, Karen and Wes.
And look, we can hang around for a little bit, but yeah, up here we've got sort of how you can contact us. Feel free to, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send us an email direct.
There's a lot of smart ups here.
Yeah,